India is going to be our moderator. If you have questions, she'll come around with the microphone. And then he will be voicing, so you'll have to give the microphone back to us, for Janine and Melina and myself. Do you want to sit on? Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a question that you would like to ask, don't be shy, raise your hand. Oh, come on, guys, dig deep. Oh, you're signing. Okay.
So you know the father of space travel was a deaf Russian. Were you aware of that? The father of space travel was deaf. In the 1900s, he was deaf in Russia. Did you know that? Even Kerry O'Malley, you didn't know that? I think somebody has the name of the person who was a deaf Russian, who was the first, the inventor of space travel. We were talking about it, they looked it up, and I learned something new today. What's the name on the phone that you have of the deaf Russian that created space travel?
Updating. Hello, please.
Any other questions or lots of questions? Who's next?
You referred to the men working on this, whatever, mega project for 10 years. Was that in sort of sporadic research chunks and special contained projects, or was that a continuous commitment? How did their work actually take place in the course of their lives, in the course of taking 10 years out at the beginning of their careers?
Do you have one of them you were prepared to answer? Only David.
So I can explain. It started in 1961, and it was not continuous. When NASA needed us, they would call us and fly us down to Pensacola. We'd do some testing experiences, and then they'd fly us home. It was a lot of flying back and forth. They'd call us sometimes 2 or 3 days at a time. Other times it would be 2 or 3 weeks. So it varied a great deal depending on what they needed us for. And sometimes those tests would be the same test multiple times. Like the zero gravity involvement was a lot. There was a lot of that. So it very much varied over that period. So my question was, do you wish you could have gone to the moon? David says yes. Barry says yes. Oh, yes. And John, why wouldn't they let you go to the moon? Was it because you were deaf? I've been married to Barry for 55 years. Barry always told me since he was a boy, he studied the sciences, he dreamed of going to the moon. He loved to study the moon. So the thought of being able to do that and being an astronaut, you knew Armstrong, right? He was the one that didn't want to meet you. Oh, Grisham. Grissom was the one that didn't want to meet the Gallaudet 11. They were around. He knew about the Gallaudet 11, but was unwilling to meet them. So the astronauts, the first 7 astronauts all worked together, and they knew of the Gallaudet 11. They were not far from each other where they were housed, but they didn't actually want to meet the group. They felt it was below them. But they were happy to do the work anyway. But he always dreamed that one day he would actually get to the moon.
Thank you. It looks like Dave.
And maybe he will.
Something to add. Dave has something to add here.
I'm going to say back in the year 2000, here at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., there was an event that I attended. I saw astronaut John Glenn there. So after the event was over, I went up to meet him and I started to talk to him about my involvement with NASA at Pensacola. And he said, wait, he knew all about it. He said he went through many of those same experiments that we went through, and he kept getting sick from them. He had heard that we never got sick, and he envied us.
Thank you. I'm going to hit this question right over here.
Thank you. My question is, how did you manage your life, given that it was so interrupted continuously by NASA? How did you work? How did you live when at any moment you could be interrupted?
I always thought it was like, it was an adventure for me. They needed me to go. They called me to go. It was a fun opportunity. So it was a fun thing for us.
John has something to say.
I also feel like we really enjoyed going. We were getting paid, and that was a good thing.
Okay, I'm going to take this question right here.
But what did your bosses say? You had to get up and go all the time.
For 3 weeks sometimes.
Our bosses said, just go, no problem. They wanted us to go.
Okay, we have another question right over here. I'm going to pass the microphone to you.
Sometimes it was problematic with my boss, but somehow they talked to my boss and he figured out how to let me go. At one point we went for 10 weeks. That was the longest time we had to go for. Somebody else had to do all my work for that 10 weeks.
Sandman is going to ask the question.
Did the Gallaudet 11 finish their goal?
I'm guessing we did. We helped the space program. That's all I can say.
Okay, we have a question right over here.
Actually, comment from Barry. We helped them design the capsule. Through Dr. Graybell's work, he used the information he got from us to resolve the problems they were having with the capsule.
I'm wondering, how has NASA acknowledged your contribution to the space program? If I wanted to do some research and went to a NASA website, would there be any mention of the Gallaudet 11?
Actually, we started in 1961 through 68, and then there was a long period where NASA seems to have forgotten us. We never really gotten any recognition prior to 2017. That's when Gallaudet developed that exhibit that referred to the Gallaudet 11's work. After the opening, at the opening of that exhibit, they invited a historian from NASA who actually came and was involved and was fascinated by it. And after that, we developed a very good relationship with NASA. But it was only since 2017.
I have a young person with an arm that is probably getting tired.
Did any of you have like astrophobia? A little bit of astrophobia?
Now, never felt that way. Very saying no. I was really gung ho about it.
Okay, the next question.
I have a follow-on question to this lady's question about the NASA recognition. Does the National Air and Space Museum, either location, have any exhibit or public recognition on their website for the Gallaudet 11?
I think so. I think they actually do. We tried to get an in. Jean Berge, when she was here, and she developed some of that exhibit, she wanted Gallaudet's exhibit to go to the Air and Space Museum, but they declined, that they didn't have enough space for it, etc. They were working on renovations. They put off those conversations, but it has not yet happened.
Okay, our next question. He's gonna come up and sign his question.
So Barry is saying, Jean Berge did want to send some of the deaf people, NASA wanted to send some of the deaf people to outer space, but the Pentagon said no, and we don't know why. I don't know if you know about the screening process for the Gallaudet 11. Was everyone born deaf, deaf from birth, or were people late deafened? do you have any idea what the screening process was that NASA underwent for the Gallaudet 11? Sorry, I was in the dark. I was wondering if NASA had certain screening criteria. So all 10 of us became deaf via spinal meningitis. So we didn't have any hearing or any balance at birth. So before they did any work in rockets, they knew that motion sickness was going to be a problem. So they started out trying to find ways to prevent motion sickness. Because they knew motion sickness originates in the inner ear. So all of us had meningitis so that our inner ears were unable to hear or have any balance mechanisms. So our balance mechanisms weren't functioning. So the reason they chose us for involvement is because they knew that we couldn't get motion sick. For the purposes of research, they wanted a comparison base for the motion sickness between those hearing astronauts. So all the research we went through had a hearing group compared to our group because they were trying to learn from those experiments. So Barry's answer to that was question. He became deaf at age 4 from spinal meningitis. So when he was screened, they put water in his ear. And then they did a hearing test. He was so deaf, it was a joke about how deaf he was. They turned it down to 0 decibels. He couldn't hear anything at any decibel level. Then they had him walk down a plywood plank, and he couldn't walk straight. So the screening, they'd have hearing people try and pretend they were deaf. They would do this test, and their eyes would shake, and you knew they weren't really deaf. They were when they put water in their ears. So that's how they eliminated them.
Okay, my next question here.
But also, not all deaf people are immune to motion sickness. I get very sick. So every time I pop a Dramamine, I think that because that is all because of their research that I can take
Medicine like that. So for any of you that get motion sick and you take medicine, you have them to thank for that.
Okay, I'm gonna take a question over here in the corner.
I think the story of your lives definitely deserves a movie. And as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm wondering who might play you. But I'd like to ask the men, if there was a movie about the Gallaudet 11, who would you want to play your character?
I don't keep up with current movies anymore. Who would play me in the movie? Got to be a handsome guy like you. Handsome guy like him. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise.
I have a question for Janine and Melina.
Well, hold on one second. NASA was established in 1958, 59 or so. They started very slowly in their work. When President Kennedy became president, he made his declaration that we will go to the moon. And challenged with that, Congress spent lots of money and into NASA. And when they came to visit us and selected us to be involved with their research, the Russians got to space before America. And they had intelligence problems, motion sickness problems. So they knew that NASA had to find a way to prevent that from happening to America. So that's when they involved us in studying motion sickness. All of this research was really all about motion sickness. They didn't want an astronaut to get into space and be unable to do their job. They didn't want them to get sick and have that prevent them from doing what they needed to do. So they wanted to prevent motion sickness. And that's what this research was really all about.
So I have a question in the back and then
Yes.
one more after that, one more.
Okay. Question for Janine and Melina. Obviously, as our mother, we saw a lot of the hard work that went into making this book. But would love to hear from your perspectives, what this journey was like.
Yeah, so, I guess this was a little bit of a challenge for me. I think she was trying to figure out what her next.
I think she was trying to figure out what her next book would be. And I had seen this story of Gallaudet 11 on social media. There's a astronaut and science communicator, Emily Calangelli, who shared their story. And I thought that would be great for Kerry to write, but I didn't want to dictate what she would write, so I didn't bring it up to her at first. But I couldn't get it out of my head. So I shared it with her to see if she was interested because it was sort of out of her wheelhouse. But I also felt that there are so few deaf authors that maybe she would be the right one to tell the story, and she took the challenge.
For me, I think I was an editorial assistant when I first saw this. So it was my second ever acquisition at Little Brown. So for me, it was also an honor that both Janine and Kerry trusted me with this story. Because from their perspective, they didn't know, what kind of work I had done, whether I was a worthy editor for this project. But when I first saw it in my inbox, I was just so taken by the story. I had never heard of it before. So I was also grateful to learn so much from it. And it was just incredible to me because it's not so many disability stories that we see are people succeeding in spite of their disability. But for the Gallaudet 11, this was a success story because of their disability. And seeing it as Barry says so well in the foreword, a hidden ability within his disability. And I just felt like this story needed to be told. As we've seen from some of the questions, like there aren't a lot of resources that you can read about this story and learn about it. And I felt like a book would be the best way to get it out there. So very honored to be a part of the process.
One more question.
Very good comment.
Oh, there's a comment.
So when we sailed the seven seas, we discovered the eighth sea. The Sea of Tranquility, where we didn't have to, a sea of vomit. We called that the eighth sea from all the hearing people on the ship.
Okay, and our final question is gonna come right here.
They just couldn't do their job because of all the vomit. It was their fall from grace. Those hearing people were mariners. And they should have been fine. They could dance on the oceans, but they avoided being in rough waters, and that's how they dealt with motion sickness. You had to really center yourself to be able to deal with it, but you couldn't do that on a rocket. And so trying to figure out how there are no waves making you motion sick. And so that's why it was unusual. We thought that the Navy was getting sick, but that's how we got our job. But that was our eighth sea. There aren't just seven, there are eight.
Okay, our last question is coming from here. She's gonna sign it.
Did you have interpreters during the time that you were in research with NASA? No. This was 1961. Interpreters didn't really exist at that time. That was well before laws required interpretation. And at the time, deaf children of deaf people who grew up to be interpreters, they interpreted, but there were no places where interpreters worked before later into the 60s. But when we were in Pensacola, if they wanted to find interpreters for us, I don't think there were any interpreters there at the time.
Brian would like to say a few words. He works at Gallaudet in in two capacities, actually.
Well, hello. Congratulations. And it's wonderful to see Harry, David, and Barry, and John. If you're here and you have time, I recommend going to the Hall Memorial Building. It's an academic building just up the road. And if you go into the atrium, there's a nice plaque that honors and recognizes their contribution to space research. So if you have time, take a gander while you're here. There's a nice plaque with Barry on it.
Okay.
Secondly, Gallaudet, through the Schuckman Deaf Documentary Center, is in post-production on a documentary film about this story. We just received our first rough cut, and it looks great. We expect to complete documentary filming it's a 75-minute film, hopefully by the end of the summer for distribution in 2027. So look for more information on the film in honor of the plan of the distribution.
Okay, Robin.
What platform will that be distributed on, might I ask? So we're now working in conversations with several distributors and have yet to make a final decision. It will be finalized this summer for distribution in 27. So we will be sharing that with the deaf community as soon as we know.
So we are running out of time. I'm so sorry, but we do have availability for a few things I want to let you know. First, we are going to stay up here. And you are welcome. We'll try to get the chairs maybe a little closer. If you would like a photo, I don't want to move them again right now. So we'll line up here. There'll be somebody willing to take your camera for you, do a quick photo, and please exit to the lobby. There's an open bar until 4:30. I have signed all of the books, but I've not personalized anything. If you want your book personalized, I will be sitting out there. Barry has already signed all of his copies. It's just a BG. And then David has already signed. Harry and John, if you would like, will be sitting out there. If you would like their signatures, you can get that as well. The bookstore will be open for a few more minutes. My bookstore, Griffin. Griffin's my bookstore. And then, so once the pictures are done, we will go out there to finish signing. In the meantime, please enjoy a cocktail. Feel free to come up and talk to them. Even if you don't know sign, that's okay. Believe me, you'll find ways to communicate. It's a beautiful thing. So I just want to reiterate, I've never been so honored to tell a story in my whole life. So thank you for trusting me with your story, for trusting us with your story. It is absolutely incredible. I think David wants to say something.
One more thing I want to say, and that is before America went to space, they were very worried about motion sickness. The Russians had a severe problem with motion sickness. And that warning to America as a problem. But after many years of experiencing different trips, I've read several books about space travel from astronauts. And there is nothing about motion sickness. It seems that the research was extremely successful in preventing motion sickness from being a problem for our astronauts.
Okay, one last thing. I did something very unique and I asked my editor and agent to also sign books. To me, I know that it is teamwork. It's not one person ever that makes a book. And because they played such a critical role, I have invited them to also sign. If you would like their signatures, they will also be outside. I think Janine said, maybe Janine just wants to stand there. I'm not sure, but we'll be out there. Feel free to talk to us. So thank you so much for coming. We'll line up over here for photos. There's still time for you to buy books if you would like.